everyone. Welcome to Breakthrough Conversations. My name is Danielle Perry and I'm the host. You should know by now, I'm super excited that you're tuned in today for another episode of this podcast. And if this is your first time, this is a Christian podcast which features people of all ages, and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge, situation, or season in their lives, or maybe they're on their way to overcoming it with God's help. And they do share authentically. Well, y'all, we are still in the marriage series and we only have a few more episodes left, but I am super excited about today's episode because this episode just proves that our God, the God that we serve, is real. He's loving, he's true, he's faithful to his promises, and the list goes on, y'all. And the title of this episode is God's Faithfulness plus a Praying Wife equals a Husband's Return. And this episode features Mr. Bill and Mrs. Jenny Fleming. And I want to thank you both again for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on this podcast. You guys knew what it took for this episode to happen, and I'm just glad that God saw fit for it to happen. Y'all, I want you to get ready. I want you to get ready to be blessed, to be encouraged. And if you can't tell by the title, this episode is going to speak to a husband who, for a time in his marriage, turned away from God. He had some questions and he turned away for some years, y'all. So I hope that you are ready to just hear their story. And this is part 1 of episode 36. So you already know there's going to be a part 2, and you have to watch both episodes to truly hear what their story is all about. Again, Bill and Jenny, thank y'all so much for sharing your testimony, your story. I know that is going to bless many others. And for those who don't know, really quick, I met Jenny at a summer Bible study of my friend Nicole that she hosted last summer. And Jenny shared a bit of her testimony there. And so eventually I felt led by the Lord to ask her if her and her husband would be willing to share their story. And they said yes. And so here it is, y'all. Without further ado, episode 36. Enjoy and be blessed. They are none other than the Flemings. Hey, guys.
Hi, Danielle.
Hey, Danielle.
Jenny and Bill Fleming. I have you both on today to share your story. And before we hop into the questions, I do want you to share just a little bit about yourselves so that our audience can know who you are.
Who's going to start? Jenny, you want to start? You want me to start?
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Jenny, and I'm 39 years old, and I'm a mom of 2, and we also raised 2 other boys that we didn't birth, but so we have four boys total, and I'm just excited to be here. I don't know what else people want to know about me, so if you want to know more, reach out to Danielle, and she can give you my number.
Whatever you want to share, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
I'm Jenny's husband, Bill. Hi, everyone. I'm father of 2. I have a 2 and a 7-year-old. Our 2-year-old is about to turn 3, so we're really excited. Next week's his birthday.
Okay.
And I'm 48 years old. And also, just hit up Danielle if you have any questions about me. It's okay. Ask anything.
That's right.
I love it. I love it. Well, as you guys saw in the email, I don't have a title yet for this episode. But I'm sure I'm going to get one by the end once we just talk about everything. But we are going to talk about just your story of how, Bill, there was a season in your marriage where you actually walked away from God, as I understood correctly, right? From Jenny, right?
Yeah, just really questioning, like, God, did I have a misunderstanding of God because I was praying and didn't see anything happening, and just really confused about who God is and how he was able to help in my situation.
Okay. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we talk about that, I do want to just ask you guys, how and when did you guys meet?
So we met in 2004 in August, and I'm pretty sure it was like when you literally just pulled up to Baltimore, right?
Okay.
So we met at Bible college, and I was there. I was starting my 2nd year, and I just happened to literally be at the entrance of the school when Bill walked in, and another young man walked in too. They both walked in at the same time, and I like to talk, so I was just like, "Hey guys, welcome to the school." And Bill said he had literally just pulled in, like from driving from New York, and I don't know. To me, it's still funny. I think it's worth telling that being from a Latin background and from a Latin neighborhood, this was the first time that I was in a school that didn't just have like Latin people and African Americans. I didn't really know that many people from, that were Caucasian. So they came up and one was named Bob and one was named Bill. And I was like, wow, I've never met a Bob and a Bill before. So I was trying to like keep it straight in my mind who was who. But that was the first day that we met.
Yeah, I was literally just pulling up the car from New York. I had driven down and I was trying to figure out where I was going to be sleeping and where the dorms were. And I can still remember walking into the school and seeing Jenny and remember her shirt that she was wearing.
Oh, that's cute.
So got it immediately. She stood out. I wasn't looking for a relationship at all, but I saw her and I was like, oh wow, she's like a special person. Like, I would like to meet her and talk to her and find out her story. And
good for you. I'm real talkative.
I love it. I love it. So you guys met at Bible college. Which Bible college did you guys go to? It's called
Maryland Bible College and Seminary.
Yeah. Okay.
This is not far. Like 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So at what point did you guys begin a relationship?
You want to answer?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So I was always the most shy person ever. And afraid to talk to people, and so I thought it was a good idea just to watch Jenny. Once I knew there was something special about her, just to watch her life, see what kind of person she was, and so I did that for about a year. And my coworker at work, who also went to our Bible college, his name is Rob. Rob knew that I was kind of interested in Jenny, and so he was seeing a girl, and he told her, and she was kind of instrumental in us kind of like getting our that first time together, first date, so to speak, first time together. So her name is Kate, and thanks Kate for that, helping me out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So were you caught off guard by him approaching you, or how'd that go?
I think I was at first. So at first, Kate, like Bill said, Kate was like, hey, you should come with us to this. We were going to the Helping Out Mission banquet, like their graduation banquet. And she was like, we have an extra ticket. It's me and her boyfriend Rob and Billy. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll think about going with you guys. But then she, like, every time I would see her, she'd be like, did Bill ask you yet? Because that's what she had said in the beginning, like, oh, he might come up and, ask you. And all. I said, okay. So I really thought we were just going on as a group. But then she kept coming up to me, like, several times, like, did he ask you yet? I was like, no. And then I even started to think, maybe he doesn't want to ask me. I told her, like, maybe you're pressuring him, but, like, maybe he wants to ask someone else. Like, just calm down, Kate.
Calm down.
But at one point, it just became clear that, like, okay, I think this guy maybe is interested in me, but I wasn't looking for a relationship, and I thought he was a nice guy, but I wasn't like, I wasn't like fell in love at first sight or whatever people say. So, but he did finally end up asking me, and I decided to go. But in my mind, I was convinced it was not a date, and different people were like, oh, you guys are going to go on a date? Wow. I was like, no, guys, you're confused. It's not a date. We're going as a group. And like, and it took me a while to realize, that was definitely our first date. I just was unaware.
Okay. So how long did you guys date prior to getting married?
I figured that out. It was 19 months, I think it was. I have it written down. Let me see if I'm right.
19 months, so probably about a year and a half.
Yeah, yes, that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
But I do want to say something interesting, if that's okay, about the time that he was watching me, which I didn't know about, and actually I didn't find out about that until we were already engaged.
Okay.
Because you happened to share that with my mom's best friend at the time.
Okay.
And she came up to me and she was like, what a wonderful story and what a godly man. And she was just saying, like, isn't that amazing he watched you? And I was like, what are you talking about? So she tells me the story. And so then I go back and I'm like, you watched me?
Right.
But I mean, I wasn't creeped out by that. I was just like, wow, that's so like, I never heard of that before.
Yeah.
And But the most interesting part is when I look back at my life, that was like my hardest year of my young life. You know, harder things have come since then.
Yeah.
But that was like a time of transition for me, and I gained like the what do they say, like the college 15 or whatever. So I had like gained some weight, and I had never even considered my appearance. It was not a big deal for me, but gaining a little weight, I felt like all of a sudden like not sure of who I was inside, outside, and it was just like I had a hard time like with loving myself, I guess, or I don't know, I was just feeling some kind of way about myself. So it was so interesting to me later to realize that the time when I felt most like unlovely and unseen,
and all that.
yeah, and I even felt like kind of invisible too, I think. Like, do I really have friends? Do people really love me? I'm far from my family. I feel like I don't matter. And then to know that like my future husband was already watching me, and like he told me in detail like he was praying for me and like different things that he would pray, and I was just like, wow, we don't actually have no idea, you know.
No idea. Wow.
Yeah.
So Bill, did you see any of that? Like when you were watching her from afar, did you notice that I can tell that maybe she's not as secure about herself, or maybe she has some things that, you know, she's dealing with? Like, did you see any of that as you were watching her?
I can't say that I did see any of that deep personal stuff that was happening on the inside, but maybe I think it was God leading me, and you know, His timing for whatever was going to happen with the relationship. Sometimes the relationships, they don't work out like you might have the idea this is a person, but then it's someone else that God brings in later. So the timing is like we don't know the timing of God. But going back to your question, I remember talking to her dad, because her dad had just given his life to Christ.
Okay.
And he was at the church all the time, so I was always seeking him out just to talk to him.
Okay.
Find out how he was doing. And he would kind of like tell me a little bit about Jenny, and
so you were getting some tips about Jenny from her dad, right?
We were praying. I was praying, praying for him, praying for her, and because I was serious. I wasn't interested in just dating. Yeah, I was interested in like marriage, because marriage there's a lot of blessings and a lot of promises that get unpacked when you're in a covenant marriage with another believer. It's like
absolutely. Okay, all right. So about 19 months you guys dated, right?
Yeah.
And so what was the proposal like? How did you propose, Bill?
It was on Jenny's birthday.
Aww.
And her family was there, and I was nervous, of course. But yeah, so I had a ring for her. Okay. And I got a ring made for her. I think she kind of knew, because I got her ring size, and when you get that ring size,
no, I had no idea.
You had no idea?
We had been seeing each other for quite a while, and I'm trying to remember. I'm drawing a blank right now, but we had gone somewhere that day.
We went to Amish country, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because that's what I wanted to do for my birthday. I'd never seen the Amish before, so I wanted to go up there and see. And it was a beautiful day. And my siblings I've always been about family, so like my siblings who are a little bit younger than me, like 7 to 9 years younger, they were still kind of young, and they were all into it, you know. So it was fun. And I remember my mom had made us some. Well, no, she didn't give it to me till later, but she made us these little keychains, and it said like our names and that date and a heart. Okay. I can't remember now. She gave it before or after he proposed, but I thought, oh, this is cool, but I wonder, why she's giving this to me. But then later it made sense, because everybody knew it was going to happen that day. Right. But I just remember, like, I loved spending time with Bill. But when we got home, which was late, we got to my mom's house because I was living with my mom. He, like, wouldn't leave. I was like, why is this man not leaving? And, I mean, I loved spending time with him, but he was just, like, lingering and lingering. Right. I was like, okay, are you going to go home now? Like, bye. And, but, then quickly he was like, well, yes, but, can you sit down for a minute? Aww. And I was like, okay, what is happening right now? But I still really had no idea. And then my brother and everybody starts coming down, and I was in the living room. So then I started to get a little bit of an idea. I was like, either he's got some kind of disease, like terminal illness, or
not a disease, Jenny.
Or he's going to maybe ask me now. I don't know.
Yeah, your aunt brought out her camera.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
was
you can
like,
record it,
okay,
there's
here
a
we
video.
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aw.
We still have the video, actually. It's so pixelated.
Right.
bad.
Because
So
technology
quality.
back then, right? Wow.
But
Okay. That's beautiful. So, how long were you engaged prior to getting married?
so I was like a little less than a year.
Okay.
It was like 10 months. Something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you guys are married. Well, talk about your wedding day. What was that like?
Our wedding day was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
We got married in January,
Okay.
and it was a blue sky and like unseasonably warm
Oh,
day.
wow.
It was
Yeah.
really a gift
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. Now, did you
Yeah.
guys get married here in Baltimore?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the area, yes.
Do you remember it was St. John's
Timonium.
in Timonium.
Mhm.
Yep. It was a really pretty chapel. We weren't congregating there, but they, they like rent out the chapel.
Yeah.
And we had a reception at the Long Green Volunteer Fire Department Hall.
Oh, okay.
It was
okay.
really pretty. I remember my favorite part of the whole wedding day, though, was the wedding ceremony.
Okay.
For some reason, it was just so special.
Yeah.
It was like my favorite thing. Yeah.
I remember like walking into the reception, and when they announced our names, you know how they like introduce like the wedding party and everyone comes in, and
Yeah.
and just everyone standing up and clapping, and like how good that felt. Like
Oh, yeah, and cheering
Yeah.
to
for
be
us.
noticed and
For
appreciated,
sure.
and everyone came for that special day.
For sure.
I felt like so much love, God's love from other people.
Yeah. Now, did you guys have like a small wedding, large wedding? What was that like?
We had we invited like 125 people.
Okay,
So
okay.
I don't know what that's considered.
That's I would say that's probably an average size wedding. Then again, I don't know. Who am I to say if it's
Yeah.
average size or not? But okay, that's a good amount of people, family, and maybe some close friends or whatnot.
Yeah, some
Okay.
close people from different churches. We were like kind of involved in a couple different churches, so
Mm-hmm.
which we still are.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys get married, and how long? Well, no, talk about just your marriage early on. What was it like now, just being married?
That first year, I could just remember how tough it was,
Okay.
and I think it was tough. I was thinking about that, like why was it so tough? And I think maybe because when you're single, maybe you're living a little bit more in like the futility of your mind, so to speak, and this ideal situation in your mind of how things will be. But then when you're actually living with your spouse, things are a little bit different.
For sure.
And they could be great. They could be great at times, like and challenging at times. But at least like you're in that real situation where God can work.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking like in your mind, it's kind of futile in the sense that like God really, you can't really grow. You know, and iron sharpens iron. So when you're in a marriage, it's like you have your spouses right there, and you are sharpening each other. All the good stuff is getting polished. The tough stuff's getting kind of worn away.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of good times, but it was challenging because Jenny's is Spanish and I'm American, and like she's a girl, I'm a boy. We just have
Right.
different differences.
For sure.
And you have to work all that stuff out that first year. Like,
Yeah.
how are we going to do this? How are we going
Yeah.
to have our living situation going to be like
Yeah.
a lot? It's a lot.
It
for
is a lot.
Newlyweds.
It is. I would say I was actually having a conversation recently with my husband, and I was telling him, babe, our first year was our hardest year of marriage, because it's a lot of what you said. It's like you go from being single to now living with someone that you're in love with, right? But you're having to now just everything is now co-partnership, So, okay, well, you don't do things like I do them. Okay, now we got to figure out how do we do this together, So it's a lot of figuring out. It's a lot of some of what happened, or a lot of what happened with me was things from my childhood came up, right? So childhood traumas had to be dealt with, and I wasn't the best communicator, so he had to like pull stuff out of me. He's like, sweetheart, you got to talk to me. But I was so used to keeping things in because that's how I grew up. I didn't really talk a lot because my parents had this whole thing of whatever happens here stays here. So you don't go and share anything with folks, right? So I kept a lot of things in. It helped to birth a relationship with God, or I would say it helped to, birth a a relationship of communication with God. So a lot of times all I had was God to run to. But when I got married, I couldn't just run to God. I had to actually talk to my husband in addition to talking to God, right? So for me, my first year was just full of that, just full of, oh my gosh, I got to learn how to talk. You know, I'm so used to dealing with things internally, but I have to now learn how to talk and deal with things with my husband. So I definitely hear you, Bill. What about you? Would you say the same?
I'm glad I get to answer second. Because I was totally oblivious to he's being very kind the way he's wording everything, but I feel like I made our marriage difficult the first year without knowing it, though, because of a lot of what you said, like bringing in, you know, the way I was used to handling conflict, which was you just say what you have to say in the moment and like no filters just tell the person like this is just my family culture. It's like you tell each other what the other person needs to hear, and like you know, if it hurts you, good, that's gonna help you grow, you know, like this kind of, and he's the complete opposite. Like he does not like confrontation. Like he avoids confrontation at all costs, which I think can be a very good thing. But for me, it was like, no, we have to talk about everything. We have to talk about everything right now, and everything has to be like, yeah, you gotta say it exactly like you're feeling it, you know. I've since changed my mind about that, but that's how I was for a long time. And the other thing about me is, like, I might say a bunch of things and, like, get real emotional, but then when I'm done, it's done. And now, like, move on. Hey, you know, 5 minutes later.
Meanwhile, Bill is, like,
Exactly.
crushed. Like, did
What
you
just
say
happened?
that?
Exactly.
What just happened here?
Yeah.
And then I'd get upset because I'd be like, why are you still lingering on that? Why is it taking you so long? You know,
right.
And but we've worked through a lot of that through the years, and actually looking back, we're coming up on 20 years of knowing each other.
Wow.
So we haven't married that long or even dating that long, but we've known each other for 20 years.
Wow.
So
wow.
That's
amazing. And how long have you guys been married?
Since 2008, so
oh wow,
you can help me do the math. 16 years.
Yeah,
So
16 years. January,
yeah.
16 years. Wow, that's a blessing. That's a blessing to be married for 16 years. So okay, that first year was tough. So what about, I guess, the first few years? Or when did children come in? Did you have children early on in marriage?
We did not. We had our first child after 9 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
okay.
we had a good long stretch
with
no kids. Although before we started having our own, we did, a few months before, we took on my brothers. They became orphaned, like completely orphaned.
Wow.
So we took them in and pretty much like they became ours.
Wow.
You know.
And how old were they when you took them in?
They were... One was getting ready to turn 11, and the other one had just turned 12.
Wow.
So it was a tough season of life for them. They were getting ready to, like, hit middle school, puberty, adolescence, all that stuff. And, like, it was hard for them. And they were dealing with the grief of losing both parents. And on top of that, they had to be separated from their other siblings. So they were coming with a lot. And we thought we just knew what was going to work for them and what we needed to do. Like we thought we had it all figured out.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother story. But that's how we ended up starting our family, was first with the boys, with the older boys, and then after that we started having our own kids.
And what year of marriage did you guys take them in?
I guess it was the 9th year. They moved in 2015.
15.
So,
okay.
The summer.
I guess it was at the 9-year mark.
So right before you guys started having children then.
Yeah, because because I conceived with Ian 6 months after that.
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
Okay.
Is that right? I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
I guess it might be worth mentioning too. We did, before we took on the boys and before we knew that we were going to be taking them, because we didn't realize how serious the illness was with my stepmom.
Okay.
We knew she was ill and we were trying to help her and everything, but she was very private, and I can understand why she was. Now that I know more about her life, but we just didn't know how serious it was. She hadn't shared with anyone, not even the kids, not even us, not even her sister. Like, no one knew how serious it was until we were like right there. But before that, we had been pregnant once, and we lost that baby, and it was a little traumatic. It was, and I think maybe that was. This is just my opinion, but I don't know. You could correct me, but I think that was maybe the beginnings of like some serious trials in our life. Was losing that baby, because I was 5 months pregnant, so I had to give birth. I actually had to like go through birthing, and Bill was there with me, and
That's hard.
it was
I'm
bittersweet
sure.
because you know we were having our first child, and it was like the beauty of giving birth and holding him, but then of course he was not living at that point.
Yeah.
So that was a little traumatic.
I'm
for
sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wow. And how long after you lost your first child did you become pregnant again?
It
Was
was
it soon
about
after?
a year.
Okay.
So it was like we lost Sergio was his name. We lost him. Then about 6 months later, I think, was when my stepmom passed away. 6 or 8 months later. And then 6 months after the boys came to live with us, we were pregnant with Ian. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot within a short span of time, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So describe your marriage at that point. What was your marriage like?
I always felt like, I remember having the thought constantly, every time something hard would hit, that, you know, this thing should drive a wedge in us, and it should be, like, I've heard of other situations where, you know, similar things have brought division, but I felt like challenges always brought us closer together. And I always felt that was true in our experience. And I knew that it was the Lord doing that, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Would you agree, Bill?
I think so, for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of support. Losing Sergio was our lost baby. We had a lot of support for that. A lot of people had come up to Jenny and myself also, and just sharing their testimonies about losing children. And I remember one sister from Jenny's mom's church. She had lost six babies before she had her 3 sons, and that really encouraged me that if she can lose 6, then I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And but in that season and the challenges, I remember thinking like, this is like maybe like not what I expected. Like this is not how I expected things to roll out, in my life. And maybe just getting into comparing myself to like other people that I would see at church or something, and on the outside, like how things seem to be going so well in their lives, and thinking, well, is something going wrong? Like, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I missing something? So it was a little confusing season.
Yeah. Okay. I can understand that. And too often we look on the outside, right? And we don't know what people are really dealing with, I think it's so easy to put up facades, and especially in church at times, it's easy to just, hey, I'm good, how are you, and just kind of put on this front like everything's good, when actually deep down, there's some stuff going on,
Yeah.
So at what point, Bill, did things begin to take a turn for you, I guess, spiritually? Was it around that time that you began to question God, or?
Yeah, so I always believed in God. Just I knew there was a God, but my confusion was in like, am I missing something about God? Is he different than what I've been told? And so that kind of like, I kind of drifted away from God, because I remember praying, and there would be situations at our house with the 2 boys that we had adopted, my 2 brothers-in-law, and just praying, and then not really seeing God doing anything on the outside, and then just seeing things getting worse, and stressful situations would mount, and things would just get more and more harder to bear, and I remember thinking, well, maybe like God is just different, maybe prayer doesn't do what people told me it does, like, because I'm praying and like I don't see the situation change. But now I know, like, God was there, and he was doing something for sure. And his timing is perfect. And like I was saying earlier, we could live in our imaginations and we don't ever change. But if we're grounded in reality and rooted in God's love, then we can change, and God can facilitate that change. We can be more patient and more thoughtful and minister to people and all the good things that God wants to conform us to.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I meant to ask this earlier, but I can ask it now. Did you guys both grow up in church? Did you grow up knowing the Lord?
Yes, I did. Our parents took us to church every Sunday.
Okay. Now, was that kind of just a tradition? This is just what we do? Or would you say you really did have a personal relationship with God at the time?
I remember, I think I had a relationship with God. It's kind of hard to put myself back in that. I'm just a grown-up now. But I think so. I remember I would want to go to church and hear the pastor versus going to the Sunday school. And I remember praying, and to receive Christ, hundreds of times. Whenever he prayed, I was like, yes, I want that. Yes, I want salvation. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, eventually you went to seminary. So you had a desire to. Oh, what was your desire? What was the reason behind going to Bible college?
So I had two. I had someone said that before you get married, before you start your career, take a year, 2 years, 3 years, and get grounded in your relationship with God. And so I thought that was really, really good advice. Go to Bible college and learn what the Bible says. Learn about the promises of God. And so that, and then also missions work was in my heart. And so I said, maybe God could use me. And so I want to be available for that. And so those are the two.
Okay. Now, Jenny, did you have a similar background as far as growing up in church, or how was that for you?
So I, my parents were culturally Catholic. So I only had a very general understanding of okay, there is a God, and we believe in Jesus. But it really was not. We didn't go to church really. My parents didn't talk about God. It was so I would say no. But when I was 12 and my mom had just separated from my father because of abuse, I remember that she, it was hard for her. And even, I didn't even understand how hard it was for her until now, looking back. But someone reached out to her and said, why don't you come to church and be encouraged and stuff. And I think that was the first time she really considered going to church to really seek God and seek help and seek a different kind of life. And so I went with her, and pretty quickly I accepted Christ, maybe the second time that we went. And it was at the Easter drama that we just went to watch this week, actually.
Right. Okay.
But back in 1997. And they presented the gospel that's in the scriptures very clearly. And I felt like I really understood it pretty clearly. And that's when I accepted Christ. I was 12. So I wouldn't say that I grew up in a Christian home until then. But after that, yes, my mom began to take us every week. And I wanted to be there. And I really was I was sold into it. I was very dedicated. And I really felt also that I just felt excited, and I felt like things made sense to me, and I was growing in my understanding. And a couple of years in, my dad, he didn't want us going, and so we got some pushback from him, and I would even say maybe a little persecution from him. So I did stop going for a couple of years, but then the Lord did just bring me back my last year of high school, which was good timing.
Okay.
And that's what made me want to come to Baltimore for the Bible college, because I was okay, I did my own thing for a few years. That didn't go very well. Let me just recommit to the Lord and really take it more seriously now. I'm older, and just take this next step. That'll be real commitment, leaving the young foolishness behind, and just making a decision that I'm going to go to this place and live with other Christian women, because I was living in we called it a dorm, but it was like a house of like six of us, all going to the Bible college, and that was the beginning for me, I would say, of like a lifelong commitment.
Okay.
By the grace of God, it'll continue to be till the day
Absolutely.
that I pass.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So going back to when Bill was having that season of questioning God and all those things, how was that for you, Jenny? What were you dealing with as a wife? And actually, at what point in your marriage did that begin? Was this after you had children, biological children?
It was after.
Okay. Okay.
I've given it a little more thought since I knew we would be talking about it, and I think I believe anyway. It's hard to know, right? Because like only God really knows when something takes root and takes seed and then starts to grow. But the first that I began seeing signs of, like, Bill is not, in his own words, not interested anymore in going to church and the things of God.
And was that a conversation? Like, did you come to Jenny and tell her that?
Not at first.
Not at first, okay.
But because of the way I am, it did become a conversation because I wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
But
so you kind of noticed something going on.
I noticed that he started not coming with us on Sundays, and it started as one Sunday, then another Sunday, then another. So that was the first sign, if you will, that I saw. But in reflecting, I think it probably started before I noticed, and that was probably in like 2017 or 18.
Okay.
So so our son was about one and a half.
Okay.
The boys had been with us for a couple of years already. It'd been a couple of years since we lost the baby. And I think, looking back, I think maybe the seed kind of started when we lost the baby. That's what I think, but I don't know for sure. Because I do remember Bill saying to me after we lost the baby and we were thinking about having another one, he said, I can't lose another one. This was before we conceived, and we were talking about it. He said, because if we lose another one, he said, I don't think I can handle it. I don't think I think I would be mad at God if we lost another child. So already I think his heart was pretty fragile, but I think what he and I didn't realize is really, like, he was fragile in the sense of, if anything else really challenging comes, maybe it's going to be enough to, like, tip him over kind of thing, And, but going back to your original question, so I noticed he wasn't coming, and then, like, 1 week turned to two, turned to, like, almost every week, and I like to just talk about things. So I said, hey, like, what's going on? Are you going to not come to church with us anymore? I don't remember how the conversation went anymore, but I just know that I did ask him point blank, and his answer to me was, I'm just not interested anymore in going to church. He said, I've gone to church for, like, over 40 years of my life, and I'm not interested anymore, and at this age in life, I don't want to do anything that I'm not really interested in. I've done that already. And he was like, yeah, I'm not going anymore. And I think also me asking him kind of gave him the opportunity to, like, get it off his chest,
Yeah.
And at first, I didn't argue with him or anything, I realized this is a personal decision and stuff like that. But I think in my mind, I was thinking, like, this is not right. And also, like, taking it a little personal, like, how can he do this to me? Like, because this kind of disrupts my plans for our family and, like, all these different things. And so I would say for the first couple years after we had that conversation, and we had other conversations too. Like, I asked him once, can you tell me a little bit more about your, like, what are you thinking now about God? And I could tell that he was hesitant to share, some of his thoughts, some of his thought processes. And it probably was because in the first couple years, I did feel like, well, I gotta do something to, like, convert him back or, persuade him back. And I think I really was trying, not actively all the time, but whenever I could, I would, like, bring up something and be like, you should really think about this, or I really thought I was gonna, like, convince him somehow. And then I also kind of grew up with a little bit of, like, critical environment. So looking back, I think I used some of that too, like criticizing him. Well, maybe you wouldn't be going through that, or maybe you wouldn't feel that way if you like turned to God, or if you would. But looking back, I don't think that was helpful at all. And I had a very defining moment in that season of life, I think, when, I mean, I had been praying for him, of course. Most of my prayers were probably like, God, why are you letting this happen? And like, this was not our agreement. Not that me and God had an agreement.
Right.
But I had decided in my heart when I was single and didn't even know Bill that I was kind of done with thinking about a relationship. I'd had a couple of relationships in high school, and they were not good. But they did serve to show me that you can't really know what's in someone's heart. And I was choosing like guys that were, in the end, it was not a good relationship. And so once I had come back to church and everything, I remember telling the pastor, like, I don't think I want to get married. My pastor at the time, I said, I don't think I want to get married because I read statistics, and it says that 93% or something like that of women end up with a man just like their father. And my dad was, I loved him. He was good to us, the kids, but he was abusive to my mom, and it was not a good relationship. And my mom was always, and all the kinds of abuses. My mom went through the different ones, emotional, physical, all that stuff. And so I didn't want that for myself. I was like, I'm not doing that. She did that for like over 20 years. I'm not doing that. And so then the pastor said, but if you let the Lord choose, then it doesn't have to be that way. You can break the curse, he said. You can break the, And I said, all right, that's something to consider. But then when I got to Bible college, I remember, some people showed interest, and of course you reciprocate sometimes. And so, but I knew better than to go about it on my own, because I had tried that in high school and it didn't go well. So what I started to do was every time before I would get into a relationship with someone, and the funny thing is none of them were even really relationships. It was just more like interest and maybe spending a little time. But before that, I'd always pray a prayer and say, Lord, if this is not from you, don't let it get anywhere. And just I would envision in my mind like a piece of paper and like, just Lord, just like, piece it up and like just disintegrate it. And he did that every single time. And I remember two of those times actually, it hurt. And I remember like the very last time crying and saying, Lord, I know this is what I prayed for. This is really hard. Like, help me. I'm like hurting, So then by the time Bill came along and he was showing interest in everything, I was even more like closed to the idea of relationship and even getting to know him and stuff. I had like this wrestling with God, and I was like, you gotta get this guy, like, he's like, he said he was not interested in just dating for no reason. He was very open, like maybe one of our first couple times spending time together, he said, will you pray about a relationship with me? And he even said like, and even pray about maybe potential marriage and all that stuff. And I was like, no, I'm not praying about nothing. Like,
he was very intentional.
He was.
But you were, like you said, still closed off.
And so, but of course, and I did pray, with my same prayer, Lord, just like, if this is not from you, don't let it get anywhere, and tell this guy to back off. No. By then he was very kind, and I did like spending time with him. But I was like, Lord, he's being very forward about his intentions, and I don't know, but because I was even already thinking about being single for the Lord and being a missionary or whatever, I had all these visions in my mind, and I was actually finally okay with that in my mind, like okay with being alone and like don't have to answer to anyone, at the drop of a hat, go to another country if I wanted to.
And God said no.
Right, but God made it very clear, like, yes, get to know this guy, and then he made it very clear, like, yes, go ahead and marry this guy. And as I got to know him more, I realized, wow, like so many of the things I would ever want in a husband, he has them, even though I would have never, like, they weren't things that you could detect when you first get to know him, but as I got to know him, they came out. So, fast forward to when we were having these conversations, I thought, Lord, you knew my heart. I could have been single. I could have been walking with you without these extra like things to worry about. Like, how could this happen? Like, how could you let this happen to me, God? How could you actually do this to me? Maybe you are not doing it, but you're allowing it. And I told you this was like the one thing I did not want, to like walk alone with God, like in my marriage, you know, and have an unbelieving spouse. And it was just so hard for me to like, and that's why I tried so hard to reconvert him, or whatever term we want to use. But I do remember one of those times that I was basically kind of complaining to God and just like saying like, you know, this is not fair, and like why, and whatever, all the things I asked. I don't remember the specifics anymore. I do sense that I heard from God very clearly, and he said to me, he's my son, and I love him more than you do, and you don't know what I'm doing in his life. And stop, like, I specifically remember these words, and they came maybe like in the form of a thought, but it was like, stop judging his walk. You don't actually know his heart. You don't know what I'm doing. And I was like, all right, Lord. So, and then later, you know, I'd pray some more and then get back into a little bit of that, like, Lord, you know, why? What do you do? What are you doing then? If I don't know, then tell me what you're doing. But then I heard again from God, and he said, if you want to help me, because I know you want to help me. And it was like in a very loving way, but it was like, if you want to help me, then you have to stay out of the way. You have to stop trying to convert him. Stop criticizing him. And just love him. Love him. Don't see him any differently. Let me like walk with him and do what I'm doing in his life. And that was really hard for me. Because I'm the kind of like problem solver. Something's not right. We're going to figure out the solution, and we're going to get it fixed, like no matter what, you know. So that was really hard for me. But I can also say, like, when I finally decided, okay, I'm going to stop, it was so freeing. It was so freeing for me. And that's not to say that I wasn't, you know, disillusioned sometimes, and like it still was difficult. But I no longer had the stress and the burden of like, I have to try to have, you know, like I have to try to like fix this. And then that's when I think I started to ask him more about like, tell me what you do believe now. Because I felt like it was okay to ask him questions if it was coming from the right mindset or from the right heart. And I remember even telling him once, I said, you know, it's safe to tell me what you think. And also I told him, I want you to know why I'm asking you. And this was the truth. And I said, I'm asking you, just like when we were asking each other questions when we were first getting to know each other, just to know everything that we could about each other. I said, I feel like you're entering a new season in your life, and I just want to get to know you again. I want to know what you're thinking and what. And I could visibly see when I told him that, like, just something lifted off of him. And then he did begin to open up and share with me some of the questions he had. And I do remember clearly that he said, I have more questions than answers for you. But he did start to share some of his questions, like, it was like, is the Bible really the Word of God? And then later we would talk again about it months later or whatever, and he had come to the conclusion that it wasn't. Like, I remember you telling me, you know, I don't really think that the Bible is the Word of God anymore. And I remember him saying that you still believed that there was a God, but that he probably looked nothing like what we had been taught in church. And he did say that he was thankful for having been brought up in a Christian home, because he felt like it helped him be grounded as a young person, and there was much good that came out of it. But he no longer believed that most, if not all, of what we were taught from the Bible was actually true. And you had even begun to like listen to things about other religions, and even other not even religions maybe, but just like other ideas about God, and like, are we God, you know, are we gods, and like, all just, you know, all these different kinds of things. And but he would start to tell me about him, because I kept those conversations open, I guess just so that he could have somebody to talk to. And Yeah.
Wow.
I just remember Jenny asking me a couple of times, like, what do you think about Jesus, though? Like, specifically.
Yeah.
And that was always the tough one, where I remember she would ask me that question, like, what do you think about Jesus, though? Who's Jesus? Who's he? And in my heart, like, I love Jesus, you know. And I grew up to love Jesus, and I still did, and so I still remember that.
Wow. So
But you
During-
never
during
did
that
tell
time-
me that. I
during
don't
that time,
remember
that
you
was-
didn't tell me that.
It was
Yeah.
really great that she asked me those questions.
wow.
Yeah.
So
Powerful.
how was it, Bill, when you began? Or let me back up some. Do you know what kind of started you on that journey of is all this stuff real? Like, what was it for you that made you start to question?
I think that it was just I needed help, you know, with my situation in my house, and just the hurting and stuff, and not feeling comfortable to be vulnerable. But I think that during that time, I kind of learned how to be vulnerable and say, hey, this is kind of like what's on my heart right now, and not having that fear of like, will this person like take off running if I'm sharing my personal thoughts from my heart, like my questions and stuff. I was like learning how to like be vulnerable for the first time, and it wasn't easy for me to do that at all.
Yeah.
Even with my own my own wife, like just sharing like those things, those questions, those doubts and things. But now knowing like it's okay to be vulnerable.
For sure.
When you need to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. And you said that there were just things that were going on as far as just that were troubling at home. Was that inclusive of you losing your first child? Was it that and some other things going on?
Yeah, I think for sure. You know, it was definitely started with Sergio. Or losing Sergio was very tough for me. And saying goodbye and having to leave him there at the hospital and not take him home. It was like that was the hardest thing I ever had to go through. And then with the boys at our house, they were teenagers and they were hurting themselves and going through a lot, having lost their father, Jenny's father, and their own biological mother, and they were hurting too. And I still have both my parents, and thank God for that. But they had lost theirs, and we were trying to get them help, counseling help, with Christian counseling, secular counseling, any kind of school counseling, and then, but things were just getting harder at the house.
Okay. So it sounds like just trials made you begin to question, like, well, God, I'm praying about these things. And like you were saying earlier, I'm praying about these things, but nothing's changing.
Yes.
So it kind of led you to just questioning, I guess, who God is. And is he really good to me? Does he really hear me? And that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay.
And I think too, it's not easy. Like, it was definitely trials. And then it was just, on the outside, there was always conflict. And it wasn't the boys' fault, They grew up in an unstructured home and like not much. Like now I know because we've done so much counseling and like reading and stuff like that, and myself included. So my brothers and myself included, even though we grew up in two separate homes, we grew up in environments where nobody really worked with you on how to regulate your emotions or how to, calm down. And then you have a conversation when you're calm, or all these like things that some people get taught when they're kids. Like we didn't have that. I already described how it was for me, so it was very much so the same for them. And so, because they were hurting, and because there was so much transition, and because there was also a disconnect, like we didn't really understand. I didn't really understand how to show love to them. I thought it was all about, I gotta get these boys like military style, like to do all the right things outwardly. They showed their hurt and their like discouragement and their struggle in the form of aggression, like aggressive words. For one of them in particular, it was even like physical aggressiveness toward the house. The other one sometimes would get upset and like hit on his brother. And it just always seemed like every day there was some kind of drama. Every day somebody was yelling at somebody else. And a lot of times, because Bill did get some of that training, and maybe some of it too is just his personality type, he's not a conflict person. So we would pull him in to try to help us all out to bring the peace, or everybody would try to pull him to their side and say, like, tell him why I'm right, tell her why I'm right. And like, and I think he felt pulled from both ends, and every day he'd come home from work and there'd be like another argument about something. And then of course other struggles that came along with that. And so there was definitely always some kind of like outward, verbal, sometimes physical conflict at home. And even by then we already had Ian, and there was the added concern of like, how much is he seeing and picking up? And sometimes he would like scream and cry and feel, and we'd be like, oh my gosh, is he getting traumatized? And like, so there was just so much. And then even, now just looking back, I'm sure that when we weren't having conflict with the boys, then I might be having conflict with him because of like, you're not really, you're not seeing things the way I'm seeing with the boys. And Bill would say, let's take this approach. And I'd be like, no, we got to take this approach. And like, so it was just like, there was never a break from trying to, I guess from my end, trying to fix everything. But looking back, I tried to fix things too much, like with my own understanding. And I wasn't really reaching out to God too much. I mean, I was praying, but it was like those quick, Lord, help me and tell me what to do. But now I'm going to go right ahead and do what I think.
So I'm thinking about all that you guys have shared.
Yeah.
What I didn't hear, which I'm sure was something else that you guys dealt with, was grief over losing your stepmom and your dad, right? So you're also dealing with the grief aspect of losing them. You've now adopted your brothers. You've lost your child, which is another element of grief, right? Because that was after your parents passed away.
Yep.
And everything else that you guys just said. So it's all these things, like you said, compounded, and there wasn't really a break, right?
Yeah.
And Bill is now beginning to just question, like, this is a lot, God, and you're not helping me right now. So what's going on, type thing. Yeah. And then with that, now you're learning how to be a wife to a husband who is not the same as far as, he doesn't want to go to church with us anymore. He's beginning to have all these questions about God. You have a young child, like everything. So yeah, that's a lot going on. So how long, Bill, was it for you that you were questioning God?
That's a good question. I guess it must have been a couple of years.
I think it was about 5.
Wow.
5 years.
Wow. So you mentioned that you were asking him questions, like as God was dealing with you and helping you how to be, more gentle in your approach. You were asking him things like, well, are you, seeking out other religions and that sort of thing? So what was that time period like? You mentioned you were listening to, I guess, other folks about just, I guess, their approach to religion and that sort of thing. So just talk about that. What things were you beginning to just seek out at the time?
Just kind of answers, different philosophies about God. Like I had a strong sense that God was real, and I had my Christian upbringing, and so I was just trying to reconcile who God is and what can I expect from God, and like am I doing something wrong in my practice, and just looking at different things, comparative religions.
So it wasn't, like Jenny said, it wasn't that you stopped believing that there was a God. It's just that maybe this wasn't the God that I grew up learning to know or learning about, basically.
Yes.
Okay. So were you at a point where you almost converted to something different?
I would say no. I wasn't convinced that I could find any answers. I didn't see something that was better, I was kind of like positioned on my Christianity, and I was maybe hoping that something I would find the answer, like, oh, this is it. This is, I found something. But I never found anything in those 5 years, like, looking.
And you were looking a lot. I remember you were looking a lot.
Podcasts, listen to different podcasts, and being really smart people, but just not being convinced, like, they had the answer,
Wow.
There wasn't that hope,
Wow. So did you have moments of when you would hear those other things being talked about, like were scriptures popping up in your head that you knew? Like what was that like? Like did you hear God speaking to you during that time?
Oh, I wish I could say yes. Maybe the still small voice, but then like maybe even I would hear the still small voice, or like God speaking through your thoughts, and but then kind of just downplaying that, like, oh, that's probably just like my own thoughts, and
yeah. So, Jenny, just you said that when you would ask him about Jesus, he like you couldn't really deny.
Yeah.
So why do you think that was?
Well, because like I knew the gospel, I knew I knew what Jesus did, and I identified with Jesus as leaving heaven and coming here and dying for us, right? And so that's the love of God, right? And so Jesus was special,
Wow, I think that's so powerful, because we all know that whenever we mention the name of Jesus in certain places, everyone just, you can't say Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that you said when you posed that question about Jesus, and Bill can never really give like an answer, like that Jesus wasn't real or whatever the case was, right? That just shows the power of our Savior,
Yeah. I do remember, so I'm like wonderfully surprised to hear right now for the first time that you felt that way about Jesus, because I do remember like asking him once, specifically, what do you think about Jesus? Like I do remember that.
a couple times. Yeah.
But I remember that one of those times anyways, I remember him saying, "Oh, I think he was a good man, he teaches good things, but I don't know that he's the only way to God."
Okay.
I remember him telling me that. So
Okay.
he never really did share that like Jesus was special. Or no, I guess you did say Jesus was special and stuff, but I guess I didn't realize the depth of it. I just all my ear heard was he's not the only way to God.
I think I just kind of like went around the question. Maybe it was something like that going on, where like I didn't want to deny Christ.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that.
In case it was true.
Yeah, because Jesus is the Son, the Son of God. And like you want to have that positive confession, and I wasn't ready to abandon ship on my walk with God and relationship with Christ. Like,
wow. But I didn't know that because he didn't verbalize that.
Right.
And I don't even know if maybe you even fully consciously understood what was happening to you at that time. Because I do remember asking him, like, do you still consider yourself a follower of Christ? Like, I didn't even put the label Christian because, there's a lot of, that's a loaded term now with a lot of connotations.
Yeah.
So I said, do you still feel like you're a believer in Jesus, like in the scriptures and stuff? And I just remember him telling me he was an agnostic. And so, and I thought, okay, like that's a safe label to put on yourself, right? And that means you don't know.
Don't know.
And so, but by then I already knew I wasn't going to be like pressuring him, but that did drive me into asking myself the same questions, because logic has always been important to me. Like things have to make sense. I'm not just going to believe something just somebody tells me. I mean, I believed the gospel when I first heard it because it made sense to me. It's like, this makes sense. And so when my husband started questioning things, and it wasn't just him, I also had close relatives and close friends to take the same stance, and they went even further. Like they were, it was even for them, they it just, I could tell that they had gone even further than Bill, and just like, not interested anymore, and just like, and
so you were dealing with that
world.
too, in the midst of your husband dealing with that. Wow.
Yeah, it really did shake my world a little bit, and it led me to I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to ask some of the same questions too, but I'm going to also do the research, but I'm not going to discount what Christians say. I need to, like, I'm going to investigate more. So I started listening to, first I wanted to know, are there people from other religions converting to Christianity? And why are they doing that? What are they saying? And are there people from Christianity converting to other religions? And what are they saying? Like, why did they do it? And the only ones that really made sense were the people converting to Christianity, not the ones converting out of, because their reasons, you know, not to, like, negate people's experiences, but it wasn't logical. It was more, it sounded more like hurt, but they couldn't maybe see it as that way. And I could understand that. Or a misunderstanding. Like it was actually mostly that, like, people misunderstanding what the scripture says and taking it as something that I don't believe God is saying. You know, even if their church maybe taught that and it was wrongly taught, like, I don't think that's what scripture was saying. And then I also was looking into apologetics and, like, a lot of apologetics teachers, different really famous ones. And what I found was, instead of, like, I was like, that question, he just asked that question. Oh, like, my other relative asked that question. Oh, like, my, you know, this other good friend just posed that question as the reason why they no longer believe. And here I am hearing someone else ask somebody that question, and their answer totally is logical. It's historical. It's like there was so many, yeah, it was a strong answer. And it was enough for me. And so what ended up happening was I became, like, recommitted to my faith, but also, like, very, like, I felt like I was becoming real solidified.
Wow.
And so I think you alluded to this earlier, that maybe you heard the still small voice, but also sometimes some things I would say to you, because I wasn't approaching it as criticism anymore. Sometimes I would share with him, like, hey, you know, this is really interesting. Like, I heard this from this person. And I told him, like, I'm not trying to convert you, but I just thought it's really interesting. Like, I find it really interesting. And I would share things with him. And he would always be open and say, oh, that, you know, that sounds really interesting. Like, but, you know, then things would go back to normal. I didn't know what was going on. But I shifted focus from, because at first I think I started out of desperation and, like, how am I going to help all these people, like, come back to God? But then I realized, no, I have to stop worrying about others. And I really felt like the Lord was telling me, focus on your walk with me. Like, how is your walk with me? And I was like, maybe I could focus on that more, God. And so it really helped, you know, I was starting to really focus more on just my own personal journey with God.
Wow.
And that kind of was like a shifting point.
Wow.
But I will say that it was still really hard. Because you don't see anything on the outside. You don't see anything changing. And it's like, but I just kept praying, and I like to tell the truth. I wasn't, like, on my knees every day, you know, praying for him or praying for anybody. Like, I just was not real strong with prayer. And like, real busy all the time, and, like, not very committed in that sense. But I did pray, though, like, it just wasn't a consistent time of prayer, but I did find myself praying. And one of those times, I got a phone call once from my brother-in-law, before he was my brother-in-law.
Okay.
And no, let me backtrack. I'm sorry. So I had been praying, and again, I thought I heard from God. And, like, I know some people, it's controversial, the whole thing with some people, right, about, like, hearing from God, and do we really hear from God? But I think it's scriptural that we can hear from God.
Absolutely.
And especially because, of course, like, God speaks to us through the scriptures, and, you know, we might hear a sermon and say, wow, that was really for me. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, when you really believe that God has spoken something specific to you. And that's only happened to me maybe 5 times in my life. Like, clear things that I heard, very specific things.
Okay.
And this was one of them. And I really felt that the Lord was saying to me, your husband will return to me, but just be patient and just pray and believe. Pray and believe. And I thought, okay, God, I will do that. I will pray and I'll believe. But the believing part was difficult. I did believe, but I felt like that man in the Bible, like, you know, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Because everything else was telling me, don't believe. But, you know, the circumstances were telling me, don't believe. His words were telling me, don't believe. But then, like, I had God saying, pray and believe. and just, and focus on you. You focus on you. And so then I got this phone call. Maybe it was weeks later. I got this phone call from my brother-in-law. He wasn't married to my sister yet then. And he never calls me. He's very to himself. He's a lovely guy. We love him. He's like the best.
Yeah.
But he's an introvert, and so he's not like constantly calling, constantly texting.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I've gotten used to now. If I text him, I'm probably not going to hear back from him. But he'll read it, and later he'll say, "Oh yeah, I got your text," But it's like, "Oh, okay." But he called me and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to encourage you," and I said, "Okay, thank you." And I was surprised because again, he never called, and I don't actually remember him ever calling me after that either. And
was he specific with your marriage? Like, I want to encourage you about your marriage.
He said, "I want to tell you something that God showed me about Bill." And I said, okay. And I still remember where I was and everything. I was outside with the kids. They were running around. It was a nice day. And he said, I feel that the Lord really showed me that Bill is a son of his. Bill is a child of God. And he said, you need to know that. And you need to rest in that. And just trust God. God's doing something in his life. And just be at rest in that. And he said, that's it. That's all I want to tell you. And he's like, all right, see you later. I was like... And then I hung up, and then I was like,
of course, yes.
I was like, God,
wow,
you're confirming it for me through the most unlikely person.
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
and
where, at what point, well, how do I want to ask this? Like, was this early on after Bill began to question that this happened, or this was kind of later?
Yeah,
okay.
This was years later.
This was years later. So what would you say about year 3, year 4 within that 5-year frame, or?
I would want to say probably year 3, 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Bill, how was it because Jenny's brother-in-law knew of you, so I'm assuming that family knew that you were going through this period, right? Did your own family know?
Just the household, maybe the immediate household.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that inclusive of your parents as well?
I don't know if my dad knew. My mom might have known.
Okay.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
She did not know. And even when you would talk to your mom about the Lord and stuff, it's because the way Bill talked about God, it very much could seem like he was still, because he did believe in God. So you could have a conversation with him about God and like, just whatever, like things that are specific to God maybe, right? And especially the way his mom talks and everything, it was easy for him, and he's not a conflict person either, so he always found something to like that they could agree on, and
gotcha.
The conversation would go that way. But if you point blank asked them questions like I was, then you could really know a little bit more. And so I don't know if they had those kinds of conversations. But I do remember before my brother-in-law had called me, and before I heard from God, that promise, because I'm going to call it a promise, or that word, I think it was after I had the conversation where he said, like, the Bible is not really inspired by God. I don't believe that anymore, and I don't believe that Jesus is the only way. And I don't really know what else I believe about Jesus, but I know he's not the only way to God. Something like that. I do remember calling her. I called my mother-in-law. It was the only person I really talked to about it. Really, I just was like, I didn't want to call her because I thought, this is her baby,
right,
and like, her boy, and like, I already had my own sons, and I was like, I don't want to crush her heart. But I had to tell somebody because I needed somebody to help me pray. And so I called her, and I was like crying, and I told her, like, I told her everything that I knew so far in the conversations I had with him. But her answer really surprised me, and it kind of also helped me reground, because I shared everything, and she said,
"Ooh, wow. Well, you got to come back next Thursday to see part 2 of this episode titled God's Faithfulness plus a Praying Wife equals a Husband's Return, featuring Mr. Bill and Mrs. Jenny Fleming. Be sure to tune in on April 18th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and anywhere you can find audio-only podcasts. Breakthrough Conversations will pop up. You will not want to miss the remainder of this episode. If you have been blessed, if you have been encouraged by this episode, please share it with others that they may be blessed also. And hit like and leave a comment letting us know something that stood out from this episode today. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel Breakthrough Conversations. In the meantime, everyone, enjoy your day and be blessed.